Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Cory Camp, and today I am excited to have Chad Dumas on with us today. He is an educational consultant, international presenter, award-winning researcher, and his primary focus is really around one of the areas I'm very passionate about, collaborating to develop capacity for continuous improvement. He's written the book, Let's Put the C in PLC, and an action guide to put the C in PLC to go with that book. And I heard Chad's interview with Steve Barkley, who we've had on the show before. He was our keynote presenter at our conference for Better Together last year. And I was just so intrigued. I think there were maybe two podcasts that went together. It was kind of broken up into two short interviews. And so I reached out to Chad just to kind of talk with him a little bit about PLCs and asked him if he could use video, because that has been a big thing that a lot of the organizations I've been working with and the coaches I've been working with have been interested in this past year, is to take the use of video into their team leadership work. And we got to talking a little bit, and I said, well, why don't you come on the show and let's talk a little about it. So welcome, Chad.
Thank you so very much. Really an honor to be here and to engage in some conversation with you on this topic.
Yeah. So we'll dive right in with our first question, which is, what does collaboration among educators really mean? And you wrote the book around the collaboration in PLC. And so I think you're going to be able to tell us a lot on this particular question. But then what are some of the essential elements that have to exist for this true meaning of collaboration to really happen on a campus or in a district?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I don't know if I would say I wrote the book on collaboration, but I wrote a book.
There you go.
On collaboration. So we know from lots and lots of years of research, 50 or 60 years, that if we want to improve student learning, then we as educators have to work together to improve our practice and results for students. So that's all to say that what does collaboration among educators really mean? It means that we're focused on improving our practice so that we improve student learning. That's what collaboration is about. And it takes many different forms. There's different models to have that happen successfully. My book goes into 10 elements of what school principals need to know to be able to make this happen. I think if for the sake of this conversation, some essential elements really hone in on what Rick and Becky DeFore and Bob Aker would talk about, the three big ideas and the four critical questions. And those three big ideas that have to be present in order for collaboration to be meaningful and to impact our practice and results for kids. The three big ideas are, as we focus on learning, we're not focusing on just teaching, we're focusing on, are the kids learning it? In order to do that, we're using our results. That it's not just a hunch or a guess, but we're actually finding out whether or not kids know what we want them to know and can do what we want them to do. And then the third big idea is we're working together to make that happen. So those are the three big ideas. And then the DeFores and Bob Aker honed in on four critical questions that as teams, we really work on making sure that we're focusing on these four questions of what do we want kids to know and be able to do? How are we going to know that they know it? What are we going to do when they don't know it? And what are we going to do when they already know it? And so in order for collaboration to be effective, that's what we've got to focus in on. We've got to make sure that we're using those three big ideas and that our time is laser-like focused on those four critical questions. So what does that mean in practice? It means that things like scheduling field trips or bus schedules or duty schedules or these things that are, some people might call them administrivia. They're managerial in nature. They have to take place, but they take place at a designated time, and we do it as efficiently as possible so that we can really spend our time honed in on improving our practice and results for students.
Right. And I love that you talk about it starts with our practice, right? It's not just about going straight to the student outcomes, we have to be reflective, and that collaboration supports that reflection in so many ways, right? We might be great reflective practitioners, but there's something to be said for being able to talk it out with a colleague who can offer additional questions or ideas, or even play that devil's advocate among the team, right? To really get us to think deeply around who are our students, what are we doing with them, what are those specific outcomes, and then what do we need to do or change or do more of to be able to make that impact. So,
and that's such a good point, because PLC is shorthand for professional learning community. Well, two of those three words, if you're a math person, it's 66.66666%, right? I mean, we're 67%. 2/3 of that term is professional learning, right? It's not student learning community, it's professional learning community. And from having read and experienced a lot of the work of Bob and Rick and Becky, they're very specific and purposeful in the use of words. They didn't create that term because they were the ones who, as far as I can tell, created the term PLC, professional learning community. The literature talked about collaboration and learning in community, but nobody really coined the term until they really came along and said professional learning community. They did that specifically, and it's about us. Now, the impact is on kids, but the work is about us as adults. And it reminds me too of the work of Bob Marzano and Pickering and Pollock, going back to their great book from, I think, 2001 or 2000, the Classroom Instruction That Works, where they re-looked at all of the research going back to the Coleman Report, right, in the 60s. Coleman Report basically said, hey, it doesn't matter what you do in schools, kids are just going to turn out how they turn out. And Marzano, Pickering, and Pollock went back and re-looked at that research again and research since, and found, whoa, no. Schools have an incredible impact. And the biggest impact on student learning is from the quality of the teacher and the instructional strategies that we use in the classroom. And so it starts with us.
It really does. It really does. And then, it also reminds me, when we think about team learning or professional learning communities, the importance of what Hattie's identified as the number one factor, which is collective efficacy, right? Yeah. It's not just about the individual and their belief or ability to be able to make an impact on students. It really takes the whole schoolhouse.
Yes.
And we've got to see that. We've got to see each other as members of that impact, even if we never see that particular group of students sitting in the seats in our classroom. So yeah, I think there's a lot of those things. So let's drill into, most of the audience we have here on the Coach Replay Show are coaches, but are also campus and district-wide instructional leaders. So thinking about those essential elements, right? Those questions, those big ideas, and this idea of collaboration. What would you say their roles in supporting and fostering that collaboration are? And you mentioned a little bit of this earlier, some of those more administrative, even like housekeeping type things, they have a place, but that should happen separately from this space of this idea of collaboration. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the role of coaches and administrators is critical. So I mentioned that Marzano research of the most important factor impacting student learning is the quality of the teacher and the instructional strategies he or she uses. A few years later, Marzano and Brian Walters, I think, or Waters, I'm not sure, did some research at a school level. And second only to the quality of the teachers is the quality of the principal and the leadership practices that the principal uses. They have the biggest impact on the quality of the school. And so tightly connected. It reminds me of, I think I heard Todd Whitaker, or maybe it was Peter DeWitt, say that, if a principal sneezes, the entire school catches a cold.
I don't know if I've heard that one.
Well, I think it's a great thing because, who the school leader is, in this case, a designated leader, a principal and administrators, who they are and what they do impacts everything in a school. And so their role is absolutely foundational in supporting and fostering collaboration. And that's why I wrote the book, right? It's focused on school leaders, whether it's principal, assistant principal, coaches, school team leads for grade levels or departments, et cetera, people who are working in leadership roles to be able to make this happen. So there's a lot of things that these folks can do just to support and foster collaboration. A few things that just come to the top of my head include making sure that we have resources allocated to be able to do this. Resources is on the top of my mind because I just wrote a blog that came out yesterday focused on resources. And so resources are both tangible and intangible. We many times think of tangible resources, and that is important. There needs to be time. There needs to be equipment. There needs to be space. There needs to be materials. These things are tangible resources that have to be allocated in order for the collaboration to happen. Because if we don't have a space, physical or digital, it's not going to happen. If we don't have time designated in this day, not
outside of the day,
night, right? As part of our workday, it's not going to happen. Materials. Staff need to be able to access articles and resources and tools to be able to help them become more effective. So these are like some of the tangible resources. And then there's also intangible resources that school leaders need to provide, and that's coaches and administrators, as your question implies. So some of these are developing trust is an intangible resource that we don't think about necessarily, but it's really critical for having effective collaboration. We have to have access to new ideas and expertise. Kind of goes to the idea Rick DeFore would say that no teacher gets up saying, I'm just going to do he would throw in a curse word, a half, job today. I'm going to, no teacher does that.
Right.
No principal does that. They get up and they give it the best they can. So if it didn't work the first time, we need to get some different ideas on the table. So those ideas, that expertise needs to be made available. Collaborate. So administrative support. So that can take the form of actually being physically present in part of the meetings to help facilitate. It can also take the role of finding out from staff what things can come off the plate of teachers to be able to be more successful. It can take the role of, if teachers need to have certain materials duplicated or created, secretarial staff or paraprofessional staff can assist with that type of thing. So these are some of the intangible resources. Those are some of the first things that come to my mind. Of course, there's a ton of ways that coaches and administrators support and foster collaboration. Those are just a few things that come to my mind off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think I love that you talked about the two types of resources that are there, and I often find that the time, right, that space within the day to be able to focus on this work, or if there's a particular instructional priority or initiative that the whole campus or whole team is supposed to be getting behind, ensuring that there is time, not just that, professional learning experience where they get to learn a little bit about it and then they're supposed to go do it in their classroom, but there's time carved out for them to, in the middle of the mess of trying to implement something new and figure out how it works with your students, be able to collaborate with their peers and specialists, right? To think about, all right, that didn't work. I gave it my best. What other ideas can I pull in? But then also our actions as leaders speak so much louder than our words. So I can't say, I expect you to be doing this, but then have actions that don't support a collaborative culture within the campus, right? Some things as simple as, asking them to do all of these things during that team time, where it becomes really more of a organizational meeting than it does a meeting around learning.
It reminds me of the saying that your actions speak so loudly that I cannot hear the words that you're saying.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely right. Like, we have to model collaboration as school leaders, central office leaders. If you want your school to be collaborative, you better not be top down-ish. Right. You better not be top down. You better be engaging in collaboration with your school leaders. School leaders, you have to be engaged in collaboration with your teachers. yeah, modeling goes right hand in hand with creating this environment.
Yeah. Well, and just the same way that our teachers, those that are in the classroom, need to be able to collaborate and support each other and be reflective and focus on their practice, so do us as leaders, right? So making sure that your instructional leadership team takes that professional learning community kind of approach, or that collaborative approach to what they do. A lot of the work I've done this past year with my coaches, and when I'm working with coaches and instructional leaders, I always like to start with kind of thinking about what is your role? How would you define that? Is that defined by your district? Do you have some additional definitions that you would add into that? And then is that clearly communicated? And usually that clearly communicated part is a hole in the system there. But then, like, the teachers don't know exactly what the role of the coach is. They have some ideas built up from previous experiences or just what they've heard, but it hasn't really been specified. And then after that, we talk a little bit about, now, how does that align with, if you are the integration specialist, how does that align with the instructional coordinator and the campus administrators on the campus? There are some overlaps within that leadership, but are you working in alignment? And again, collaboration can ensure that we are doing that as leaders. So, So I want to jump into what you and I kind of started talking a little bit about back and forth on Twitter in our direct messages, which is this idea around the use of video and its impact for team learning and collaboration. So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are around video in this type of a learning structure.
Yeah, video is incredible. I remember one of the instructional coaches in Hastings, where I was a central office director for 9 years. We would meet with the coaches, I think, once or twice a month. And I remember early on when we started using video, those were the days when you had to buy the little, I don't know what, I even remember what it was called, but phones didn't have capacity.
The flip cams, right?
Is that or something like that? Yeah.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, no, it wasn't the flip phone, but I'm trying to remember. I feel like flip is in the name, but I remember those days.
Just kind of about that big, and the screen was just teeny. And I remember early on when we started doing that, one of the coaches at one of the meetings said, when you have video, people coach themselves. And I thought that was a really powerful statement, and seems to be, for the most part, true, that when people see themselves, when they get over the initial aversion.
Right. Oh my gosh, what do I sound like that? What is going on with my hands? Yes.
Which I'll give a tip to your listeners about how to overcome that was given to me, and I think is quite helpful. But once you overcome that aversion, it really does coach itself. One gets to see their actions, their interactions, their emphases on different aspects of their content, who they're interacting with, how they're teaching it, what they said and didn't say. I mean, it really does coach themselves. So that tip, now that I've kind of left you out there,
I want to know
what can you do so it's a very simple thing, but when you watch yourself on video, watch it at 1.5 or 1 3/4 time.
That's something that I do, because I've been doing video reflection for about 13 years now. And I've never thought of that as a tip for folks, but I love that. I love that idea. I watch mine in 2 times speed. It keeps me on my toes.
Yes.
Well, and I don't hear myself as much, but I can still hear it. My kids are like, Mom, why do you sound like a chipmunk? And I'm like, Mom is reflecting. So
for myself, 2 times is a little too fast, but like 1.5, 1.75. And it does 2 things by watching it at faster speed. Number one is it creates a psychological distance between you and that person on the screen. You don't feel as connected to that person because that's somebody that's going faster. The other thing it does that I think is equally important, maybe even more so, is it exaggerates what you do or don't do. So if you speak really fast, it exaggerates that. If you're constantly saying you'll catch that because it's happening more quickly. I mean, it just exaggerates our physical and verbal tics, if you will. And so so the use of video at 1.5 or 1/3 time can be really, really helpful.
That's my new tip. I'm gonna quote you on it every time, but that is my new tip to folks. I love that.
And it saves time. I mean, that's the third thing.
Exactly.
It saves you time. Because then you're not spending 45 minutes watching yourself. You're spending 25 or 30 minutes, which seems to be more manageable. So that's like at an individual level. I've also used video with myself in facilitating groups. So set it up while I'm facilitating groups. One of the things you and I talked about in our messages beforehand was it might be interesting with groups to video the groups, like with the permission of the team to say, hey, we're a team that wants to keep getting better. What say you? If we brought in a video camera at one of our meetings, we just set it up one time and we just video it ourselves and then, distribute the video to everyone and we then watch it on our own and we can come back and talk through like, what were some of the strengths and what are some areas we want to work on as a team to improve our effectiveness? You're probably familiar with, John Dewey says that we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on our experience.
Yes.
And kind of related to that somewhat is that teams don't develop unless they reflect on their development. A team can come together every day for years and never get any better if they don't pause periodically and reflect on how are we doing? How are we doing?
How's our process working for us, right?
Exactly. And so that's really critical. And so video, like I said, I've not done it in that way with the group, but your question prompted me to that. And I think that would be really a powerful thing to do with groups.
Yeah. So I want to rewind and just kind of summarize a little bit for our audience. So individuals on a team could record themselves in practice and reflect on that. And then they come to their next, session with their team more aware, right? More open, more, I noticed these things and I'm seeking some feedback. They might even bring that video to the team and share that if there's really, like, you've got to have good psychological safety within your team, a good trust within your team to be able to do that, but you can start to do that. And I think that's a really great way. Say we're all focusing on a particular element or strategy within our instruction, and some brave soul decides to not only record it, but then share it with the group to say, here's how it's looking in my classroom. And then that benefits the whole group and the individual sharing, because they'll get some great feedback. And so I hear it in practice of instruction, but then I also hear you saying it can be used on the facilitator side to reflect on how they're facilitating PLCs or learning engagement. And then I also hear for the team themselves to look at how they are working as a unit together and get feedback in that way.
Yeah, that was a brilliant paraphrase of 4 big ideas that I didn't even realize were 4 big ideas, which raises the importance of paraphrasing, right? So
there you go.
So yeah, individually, sharing it individually with the team, as a facilitator of a team, and as the team itself, thinking about how they want to get better as a team.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things when I work with groups who are doing lesson study, one of the things I recommend and have done with some groups is have them record their group meetings, but not for that reflective piece as much as, so the next group who wants to do lesson study, they've got a model for what those engagements should, can and should look like. But I love the idea of it flipping back and being reflective too. That's not something I had thought of much at the team level. So So I love that. So then when we talk about video, right, it's a very vulnerable thing. So I love that you shared that tip, which is something that I've done, but I hadn't thought about why it worked so well for me. I was thinking mainly, I was there for the whole 30 minutes. Let me get this reflection done in about 15. I also don't have to hear myself for as long and miserably. I've been doing it for 13 years now, but it's still just as painful to view myself. I'm a little more used to the uncomfort, but I know that when it comes to teams, one of the things that I talk a lot about with teams is having some structure to it, like really talking about what's the role of video, how will we be using it. So then, do you have any recommended resources for teams who are interested in using video to support their learning and collaboration in one of those 4 big ways that we talked about?
Yeah, recommended resources. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, I hadn't thought of this when we were thinking before, but all of a sudden as you were talking, it's like, oh, okay, that's a really good resource. I need to mention that.
Perfect.
Jim Knight, people are quite familiar with lots of video coaching and
here.
such. Yep, exactly. He actually has like a confidentiality agreement form template to use with folks. And I think that's a helpful thing, just to like put it on the table and let's just be very clear. It stops here, and we're not going to be sharing stuff outside of our professional realm. So I think that's a really great resource. I think things like, the Sibme software can be a very powerful tool for folks. For districts that don't have the funds, or the resources, or they're not allocated in that way, simple cell phones and uploading to Google can work, and even YouTube. And I'm not a techie expert on this, but my understanding is that there's some free, what are they called, extensions that you can get like through Chrome to help with that, where folks can then, tag and make comments on the video. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but your local...
That's the thing that Sibme does the best, right? The annotation, which supports that reflective process.
Yep. And that's like, like the Sibme is going to be your Cadillac model. That's going to be, it's going to make sure that you've got all of the great tools. If you don't have the funds for that, or you're not going to be able to allocate the funds, there's the step down versions are what I mentioned.
Exactly.
The YouTube and Google forms.
Yeah, I think I love that you mentioned Jim Knight's confidentiality form, because it does create this social contract that, should we get brave and share video of each other's, and not just look at model videos that we've kind of found on YouTube or wherever, that we can ensure the safety and security of this video, not just for our students, but for ourselves, right? It's very damaging to think that I might share a video and then, Brenda on my team is going to then put it on Twitter and say, look at what I saw Cory doing in her classroom. Not Brenda. I love Brenda's, but I don't know why that name came to my mind. But really ensuring that we do have this kind of social contract of, when a video is shared, if it's shared via a platform and not just pulled up on from someone's personal device, when they're sharing it out for other people to view on their own, that we've ensured that that confidentiality portion is there.
Right.
I think also, what about protocols, right? Can we, are there some protocols for the use of just our non-video enhanced team engagements that could also be used when we're talking about video of instruction?
Yes. Yeah. So there's like formal product protocols at like the National School Reform Faculty has, and great, if you just Google education protocols, you're going to come up with several different organizations that have quite a few different amazing protocols, some of them around looking at student work, some around data analysis, some around problem of practice. I mean, there's just a lot of really great protocols out there. The thing that my mind goes to immediately in terms of like on the ground, practical application, foundational has to be in place even for the protocols to work well. Or maybe it doesn't have to be in place, but we need to be working towards these, is what I refer to as the 3+1. And I should have called it the 1+3 because the 1 comes first, but it sounds better to call it the 3+1. So the 1 is an environment of rapport, where we have rapport with each other, and that manifests in physical body language, where we are in relationship with each other. And then the 3 are the skills of pausing, paraphrasing, and posing questions. And that when teams create a culture where we're regularly pausing for each other, giving space, breathing, allowing each other to think. We're not interrupting constantly, but we're like giving pauses. This will help with building that trust in the video part. Paraphrasing, like you did for me earlier, so it sounds like there's 4 big ideas that you were talking about there, Chad, blah, 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 blah. And then you heard my response. I hadn't even thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right? So it's right, paraphrasing for each other. It helps everyone understand that we know that we're hearing each other, and it helps to organize our thinking as well. And then posing questions to be able to then probe our thinking even more. And so I would say that 3+1 would also be a great set of skills in addition to protocols for any team to think about how can we enhance our use of these skills to support learning and collaboration.
Yeah. And really, I think, protocols are one of the things that I immediately think about when I think about our learning teams and PLCs. But it really is just like it provides the structure, but you've also have to have some of the relationship pieces in place for that to, for those to be successful. And I just want to make a quick mention to everyone who's watching that if you are taking down notes, don't worry about this. Chad sent us a few of these big ideas ahead of time that we've put in our takeaway, which you can download from our notes and takeaways site on learn.sibme.com. But that's where we can see this 3+1 right in here. So I love that. We're running up towards the end of our time together today, Chad. And so I'm going to pause we had one more question about recording team interactions, but maybe we'll have you come back on another time to talk a little bit more about this idea.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you if you've got anything for our audience, any kind of last bit, if they are an instructional leader or campus leader or a teacher leader who are looking at putting that C back in PLC, what would you recommend for them? What's your top tip for them to do this summer to prepare for next year?
Okay. So, my top tip would be that we can do this. We can do it together. And you as the designated leaders in your building don't need to know it all. So, we can do it together. We can work together. In terms of like a tip for the summer, take care of yourself. This has been a decade-long year. And I think we all need some time to recharge, rejuvenate, re-energize, however that looks for you. Take care of yourself so that you can come back ready to roll next year. If that means, reading some books to improve your practice, if it means going on a vacation or fishing or golfing or spending time with your family or cooking or gardening, whatever it takes for you to be able to ready to roll next year, do that.
Yeah, that's so true and so important. I cannot wait for some of that time for us. We've got one more week of school for my kiddos. I know that yours are in university, and so they're getting ready to round out their semester. And
yes,
it's just that time of year for everyone. Well, thank you so much, Chad, for coming on and sharing these ideas and resources. It was really a joy to get to talk with you today. So hopefully we can have you back on the Coach Replay Show again. We've got all of the information if you're interested in following Chad. It's all on the notes and takeaways. You can follow him on Twitter and social media. You can check out his latest blogs and even get his book and guide for putting the C back in PLC. So thanks again, Chad, for joining us. And everyone else, tune in next week for another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. Thank
you.